Alright, I've only got one hand marked from yesterday. It's from a session where I shot NL 100. Um, Before I get into the hand, uh, I feel compelled to mention that I've started approaching my yearly goals, or not yearly, I'd say year and a half, given I created a mission statement outlining goals for the following year and a bit until the 1st of January 2020. So it looks a bit like this, and for the past month since the advent of the mission statement, I've been pretty sick or a bit withdrawally, weaning off caffeine, things like that. So I've been gentle in terms of my approach. However, and I was kind of doing this experimentally to see how even aligning myself to let me rephrase it, aligning myself to my goals and being gentle with myself. I wanted to see what my output would look like in terms of productivity and volume. And I'm going to estimate that I probably put in around somewhere between 50 and 66% of the productivity and volume I would normally do if I were to follow a more rigid schedule. So the internal dilemma is always orienting myself such that I am coming from a place of inspiration versus desperation. I find that when I approach a more rigid structure checklist like this Excel sheet on the screen right now, and my process is I'll just fill something in when I do it. With the OCD nature of trying to fill out an entire page with green fill or blue if it's something that's acceptable. Uh, I guess today I'm kind of inadvertently doing a full water fast because the food I did have left over is, I think it got contaminated by some rotten lettuce. Um, right now, my list of foods that I'm eating is narrowed to two chickpeas and lettuce while I'm doing um, this elimination diet to see which foods I have intolerances towards. Just to go on a quick side tangent, I found so far introducing foods onto a staple diet of just beans and lettuce. I've had pretty tremendous skin flare-ups in the seborrheic dermatitis department, and they've been tofu, broccoli, and avocado. And I'm just, for some reason, unbeknownst to me, outside of my scope of understanding, all three of those items I was incredibly sensitive towards, and right now I'm recovering from what I described to a friend as an inside-out tomato face. Anyway, that was a quick side tangent. So the mindset which I'm going to cultivate from here on out is adhering to more of a structure as I've outlined here, with each of these items on the list carefully placed on the list in order to realize my long-term goals. It's approaching it's approaching these goals from a point of inspiration, because I've done this in the past where each task becomes burdensome insofar that I'm, in a way, adhering more to a desperate mindset, which a lot of self-help junkies seem to fall prey to, which is really just the running away from one's self. Um, Trying to do a better job describing that. But really, it's just motivation from a baseline belief, or you could call it like a root belief, that you are unworthy to begin with. So the pursuit would be self development because the root belief is I'm not worthy, so I need to work on X, Y, and Z. And working on X, Y, and Z might give you short term fulfillment and might raise your baseline. I'm saying baseline a lot, but it seems relevant, I guess. Baseline frequency to higher levels, but it's usually quite fleeting and transient because the root belief is what requires attention, not not the escape from the root belief, which is something a lot of people fall prey to, and it's kind of this pursuit is embedded in society and societal conditioning, I think, where we're trained into viewing ourselves as inferior in whatever realm seems most relevant to the egoic mind. And from there blossoms the directions we go in terms of escapism, which can be in modes of self development and equally in modes of self sabotage. So, anyway, in order to maximize volume and productivity, I am more so inclined to adopt a position of self compassion, self love, instead of its converse, which would be self hatred, which is something I've fallen into quite a lot as I've been a self help junkie um, for quite some time now, probably all of my 20s. And the baseline belief has never really shifted that much. It seems to be loosening quite a bit of late, given all the work I've been doing on the subconscious mind and whatnot. Anyway, like I said, today's an inadvertent water fast day because I ate like maybe 5 spoons of chickpeas and it tasted awful. And then I realized that the lettuce I was using was rotten at the end, at the head. So that just seemed to contaminate everything and um, pretty delirious. So we'll see how that translates to poker later today. It might not be so wise to play 100 as I'm shot taking, but I'll see how I'm feeling. What else is there to discuss? Here's all the stuff I'm doing, basically. A lot of it's acronyms. I started doing 1 meal a day. Probably another reason I'm lightheaded is my body is adjusting to it. But it's basically a 23-hour fast and 1 hour window where you consume all of your calories. So in that 1 hour window, I'm trying to wolf down 2,000 calories. I'm actually trying to put on a bit of weight because I don't think I was having sufficient caloric intake since starting veganism. And on that topic, I'm also tempted to switch from veganism entirely to a ketogenic diet. So going from high carbs, low fat to the opposite, um, high fat, low carbs. Both seem to have pretty profound healing effects on the gut. So I'm trying to figure out which one is most fitting to my gut biome. I've done about a year and a half of the vegan approach and done a lot of focusing on cleansing techniques and de-stressors and exercise when I haven't been uh, bedridden with sickness or whatever, which seems to be quite prevalent of late. And I don't think that's coincidence. I think that's all related to poor immunity. And while there's been some progress and things have certainly stabilized a bit more, so I think I went from severe seborrheic dermatitis flare-ups to maybe mild or moderate, so it became far more manageable over the past 6 to 8 months. But I've still been, even on food substances in the diet that I'm subscribed to, are seemingly inflammatory. So I'm quite tempted to switch entirely. I'm seeing an allergist in a few weeks, um, so we'll see what we can deduce from that meeting. Anyway, I'm doing all the usuals, and like I said, I guess the mental toll becomes when I start looking at this like it's a list which I have to check off every single day, and at that point, I am more privy to burning out. So self-love and compassion for the win. I've also decided I was doing a 7-day no-fap reset. Honestly, I didn't even get that far yet. I was doing every 4 days, and part of my gentle approach was allowing this to happen. Um, I've decided I'm just going to go 100 days because from my experience so far, so it's interesting. I've done long streaks in the 100-day plus mark, and the periods of quote unquote flatlining where you don't feel motivated and your sexual drive plummets to zero, um, they can be pretty discouraging, and uh, the, I find myself demotivated during these periods, which is counter intuitive to the initiation of doing nofap. And I've been comparing that with doing 7-day resets where the testosterone spikes at the seventh day and then re-normalizes on the eighth day. Um, and I find that those days when it takes me a couple of days, like I'm on day 2 right now of not fapping, and I feel like the motivation and mental clarity is beginning to come back, but it doesn't hold a candle to day, like tomorrow is going to be amazing, and then day 3 through day 7 is going to be incredible. But those 2 days of resetting, which are kind of unavoidable, from what I understand, of testosterone cycles, but I don't think they're worth those 2 days of. Speaking of the cycles here, I don't think they're worth the 1 or 2 days of ensuing depression and demotivation and feeling like shit, basically, compared to a longer period streak. And my incentive to do the longer period streak is because I still haven't really gotten away from porn addiction, I guess, meaning I still feel that compulsion to watch it when I do fab, and I'm attracted to the idea of a mental cleanse and rewiring during the 100 days, and then reassessing after that. Because I did like the idea of the 7-day reset as delineated by RSD Mex. He talks in detail about it, and he's found that's the best way to do things. And perhaps at some time that at one point in the future that will resonate more. But I'm pretty drawn to the idea of putting in a lot of mental energy into myself and not really socializing so much, particularly with, or rather, especially with the skin problem. I find it really discouraging to pursue many social endeavors right now. So, for instance, my original goal for September was to start going out and approach 10 girls, but that doesn't really resonate so much right now because I feel like there should be more of a priority with healing myself, my brain, my skin, things like that, before I commit to something uh, that is socially demanding and as such um, hinges on my self perception to be to uh, to set myself up properly for that endeavor. Um, if I'm approaching girls with poor skin, I'd just rather not, to be honest. I'd rather feel like I'm totally healthy. I've been pretty fixated on results too, like looking at EV and the graph and stuff, as I've been quote unquote gentle with myself. Uh, and I'm going to eliminate that. I'm going to go to 100k hands without EV or graph looking. While I'm shooting 100, I'm certainly going to look at the bankroll regularly because I might feel inclined to drop limits at some points. Otherwise, I'm still working for Corey. Tend to do that for a while. Yeah, it's a really good schedule. Just not. I just need to avoid coming from a place of scarcity, which can be synonymous with the desperation I described earlier. When I come from a place of abundance, another reason the NoFap 100 days thing seems very relevant to pursue right now or embark on. Anyway, there's only one hand I've got marked from yesterday, which is probably going to take a pile. So standard 3-bet here. I get code 4 here. I expect, I'm certainly not going to rip it in because I expect this, in this formation, this is going to be very nitty. And for that reason, my first reaction was to just fold the flop. But then I thought about it a tiny bit longer and thought, well, there's certainly an element of fear of future street projections. So the most pressing question is, what do I do in a diamond peel? I think I have to call off. Something I could just, well, let's first establish what his range looks like. I'm literally thinking it's something simple, like maybe like half queens, maybe that's like perhaps even pushing it. gonna say full ace king suited, maybe something like that in terms of value. And then I've got no idea how you balance pre-flop ranges. Because it's so nitty in practice, I actually feel like I should even give him, like maybe this is fine, and perhaps even overdoing it. But what's the squeeze percentage? Well, I've got no stats on him. I'm just gonna go with that, and then see what Pio says. First, I wanted to plug it into stove, and then just ask myself the question of, am I calling on turn diamonds? Just uh, just for educational purposes. Hmm. I don't really know how to split ranges in stove. I mean, the best way to do it. Not really sure. Maybe I should just put it into Flopzilla instead. Pause the video. Okay. So I just put in a deuce of diamond on the turn. And against a jamming range, it's really hard for me to predict what exactly he's jamming. So I think what I'll do is do something like this. Obviously we block ace and diamond combo. Just gonna guess that ace king shuts down. Okay, let's take out ace king offsuit. We would barely be priced in on the turn if he's got a range like this. So still a call. Assuming well, he's jamming slightly below pot, but for all intents and purposes, let's say pot. Oops. So that seems like the best case scenario is we get the diamond turn. Well, the best case scenario is he checks down ace king, or honestly, it's a pile spot. I'm kind of just talking my ass here. I'm gonna plug in a pile. Okay, so really simple spots. Oh, that was quick. This is the range I gave him, as already outlined in Flopzilla. This is literally my range. 75% ace king offsuit, which honestly is kind of cutting it. Maybe I should have put that down to 50%. That tops. Kings, probably 50-50 split between jam and call myself. This is kind of a generous range, to be honest. I guess I'd always call queens. Okay, it seems alright, but I'd rather go to 50% ace king. Yeah. Alright, let's see the results. So out of position bets that much. And we call, let's see what we call here. Okay. So it does look like we call all the ace king of diamonds, that's good. Call. And then the turn here is the four of spades, which makes things really easy. I'm gonna put down deuce of diamonds like before, and let's just give him a bet, which he's got pretty good balance going from there. So he bets all in. Okay. So yeah, it looks like we actually do call with the ace king of diamonds. So I think I played that pretty well. My reaction on the flop was to just fold, which was a combination of not knowing what to do on diamond turns, but ultimately probably just feeling obligated to call off and not in the highest of spirits to do so, obviously. And because his range is so nitty in this formation pre, but I think it would be a bit too. I think ace king of diamonds would be a bit too disposable if we automatically just folded here when we flopped. Again, when we flopped and when we still have split equity, and honestly, I'm not sure how to calculate that. Like what percent split equity we need. Sure, I could. I just can't think too clearly at the moment. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Well, I'm happy I ended up calling. I think that would have been a bit too nitty if I were to just lay it down on the flop. Anyway, that does it for today's video. What shall I entitle this? I've got no idea. Perhaps I can make it related to, just call it inspiration versus desperation.